When Bill C-21 was introduced, the Liberal government knew that it would be a bare-knuckle boxing match.
I think the only thing you're going after is people who have illegal guns, and they're going to have them no matter how many things you put up.
It's their signature gun legislation, a piece of proposed law that they say is critical to ending gun violence in Canada, but that critics say is completely misguided and does little to target the illegal gun owners who they say actually commit violent crimes.
Mr. Speaker, we made a commitment a number of years ago to Canadians to ban assault-style weapons from this country. There's no place for guns designed to kill the largest number of people as quickly as possible in this country.
That's not what he's doing. He's banning firearms that in many cases are not even semi-automatic.
The bill itself is contentious, it's complicated, and made big headlines recently when the Liberals tried to expand the bill. Then last week essentially said, okay, let's take a step back here. Maybe we went too far.
Today's humiliating climb down that we have forced Trudeau to make is a temporary pause in his plan to ban hunting rifles.
On today's show, the Liberals' critical error and why that might actually be the least of their worries. So, to understand the story of Bill C-21 and how it fits into the headlines lately, you only really need to know two things. One, what Bill C-21 actually does, and two, how the Liberals wanted it to do much more.
For decades, chiefs of police, advocacy groups, grieving families, and everyday Canadians have been calling for a ban of these types of firearms. They were intended in their purpose to kill people, and they have been used in Canada to kill innocent people.
Bill C-21 targets guns. It restricts access to handguns by putting a freeze on sales. It increases jail time for some gun crimes, and even provides a pathway for a court to decide, in exceptional circumstances, you're too dangerous to own a gun, we're taking it away. But above all that, a change to the bill was introduced recently that would have expanded on the current list of banned weapons. So right now, there are more than 1,500 models of what the government calls assault-style weapons, mostly rifles, that are banned in Canada. But the Liberals wanted to add guns like this, the Joseph Lang 8-gauge waterfowl gun. It's a common hunting gun. And this, the SKS, a Soviet-designed rifle popular with sports shooters. It's also been used in several high-profile gun attacks in Canada. And then there's this, an Ivor Johnson 12-gauge shotgun. Lots of farmers own one of these. Importantly, none of these is a handgun. And many would argue they're not really assault-style weapons either. And that pissed off a lot of people.
Nunavut need to hunt to feed their families and to protect themselves from dangerous predators such as polar bears. Bill C-21 was about getting handguns off the streets.
Which brings us to the government, realizing maybe it went too far and it messed up. Canada's public safety minister's exact words, "We regret the confusion."
We will not let up. Conservatives will never allow Justin Trudeau to ban hunting rifles.
So, we know what Bill C-21 does and a bit of what it now won't do, but there's one more thing about this bill that is a huge question mark that just might end up being a much more complicated, much more expensive problem.
We are now ensuring that there is a buyback program so that Canadians who lawfully purchase these weapons are treated fairly and respectfully, and now that they are next to useless as weapons, are able to obtain fair compensation for that.
Sounds straightforward, right? You set a price, you set a place, for people to hand over their guns, and however many dollars and hours later, all those guns that Canadians bought legally, but that have since been made illegal, are out of circulation and the country's a safer place. Well, maybe not. The government did publish a proposed price list of guns. Like if you own a CZ Scorpion Evo 3, the government would pay you $1,291 to give it back. Got an old Robinson Armament XCR gathering dust, That's worth $2,735. Or how about the SG551 carbine? That's a little over $6,200. But beyond that, how much do we actually know about how the buyback program would work? And for that matter, how much does the government even know about how it would work? Except to know that it's going to cost a lot of money, and there is a deadline here to figure this out. Kieran Oudshoorn, one of our producers, joins me in studio to explain. Hey, Kieran, how's it going?
I'm good, Andrew. How about you?
Good, good, good. So take me back a little bit, right? Just help me understand, like, why the buyback program was even necessary to begin with, like how we got to this.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, when the government made this decision in 2020, saying that 1,500 models of firearms were now prohibited, that means that these guns went from being either unrestricted or restricted and were now prohibited, which means they're illegal to own and to operate. Yeah. And well, they're in people's possession, so you need to go through a process where you figure out where all those guns are, then gather them, then collect them, dispose of them, but also pay people for them, because people have spent millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on these firearms, their property, and so any process where you end up taking someone's property, make it illegal, there has to be a process, a buyback to sort of to make sure that people are compensated properly.
You don't want a whole bunch of bitter gun owners left out of pocket, right? For these guns that have now been
True, they might be better regardless, but
fair enough. Fair enough. So the guns were banned almost 3 years ago.
Yep.
Those guns, you're not allowed to have them, except for the fact that the government did say, well, hang on, while we figure this all out, how we're going to get those guns back so that you're not left out of pocket, we're not going to chase you.
Right. So you're not allowed to have them, but what are you supposed to do with them? There's no plan yet.
Yeah, you don't just throw them out the window and just dust your hands and say, well, I guess now I'm a law-abiding citizen.
Exactly, and there are hundreds of thousands of these. The estimates actually vary a little bit. RCMP, using data from the government, looking at registered firearms and then trying to estimate the number of unregistered, says that there's about 150,000 firearms out there that are fall
captured by this ban.
Exactly.
Okay.
But when you look to industry, when you look at gun sellers, these businesses, they say based on their import records, it's closer to 520,000 firearms. So pretty dramatically different.
That's a big gap.
Yeah, and in terms of where these guns are right now, they're sitting exactly where they were before. They're in people's lockers, in people's houses right across the country. They haven't gone anywhere because even though they've been made illegal, you can't take them out, can't take them to the range, and a lot of them were restricted, meaning that there was already like some very tight regulations on how you could use them. You can only go directly to the range and back. Can't do any of that anymore. But they're still sitting in people's houses. And I think that's somewhat noteworthy because a lot of the justification that the Liberals gave for why they wanted to ban these guns is they said they're so dangerous that people can't possess them. We need to take these out of people's hands. But then for the next 3 years, they've just stayed in people's possession, right, and we don't know what's going to, exactly what the time frame is for when what's going to happen next.
So time frame is an excellent question. I also wonder about the cost of this, because if we're talking about maybe somewhere in the realm of 500,000 guns that could potentially be out there, how much does it actually cost to get them all back?
So this is another thing that we don't have all the details on, but we have some rough outlines that we can look at. There was a report from 2021, the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. They put out a report trying to estimate how much would this buyback cost. And using those wildly different estimates on the number of guns out there, they came up saying it's either going to cost between $47 million and $750 million, so close to $1 billion. Big difference.
They really take liberties with these ranges.
Well, it's not them taking the range. It's that they're getting different numbers from different sources.
I get you, yeah.
So if you look on this high end of up to $750 million, that's only for the cost of the firearms. That's only to pay people to take the guns from them. That has nothing to do with how much it actually costs to administer the program. So we're talking about the workforce or the application of it or any of the transportation or anything like that. And when we look to other jurisdictions like New Zealand that's done a gun buyback, and if we talk to industry experts, and I have about this, they say that it usually costs 2 to 3 times more than just the cost of the guns to do the buyback. So we're talking like 2, 3...
Multiple billions of dollars?
Multiple billions of dollars. I mean, we don't have the exact number, but that's definitely within a reasonable ballpark of what we can expect the cost for this.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
and so, I mean, you raised actually another interesting point about the administration of the program. Like, I mean, it could work any number of ways. Do we know how that would actually unfold? Like,
well, so this is, at every turn here, it's a kind of interesting rabbit hole you can fall down. You would assume that the people who might be executing this type of buyback would be the police to be involved in that.
like the RCMP.
Like the RCMP. But interestingly, police forces across the country have actually come out to say they're not that interested in getting involved. I also spoke with the president of the RCMP's union, and he shared with me, as he called it, this confiscation program. He said, there's some concerns about member safety as well in going out and collecting firearms from people.
Even that's a different way of thinking about a confiscation program.
Right. Well, that's what guns rights advocates are calling it and refer to it as.
If there is a conceivable kind of potential danger if someone didn't want to give their gun back, like it just makes me think, how do gun owners feel about the buyback program?
Well, so interestingly, I've talked to quite a few gun owners at this point. I've talked to people who are hunters, people who are sports shooters, people who work in the industry who sell firearms. And almost every single one of them has said they would defy a buyback. They said they don't want to give their guns back. And some people, they say it a little bit more quietly. They say, look, I'd be willing to go to jail rather than just taking my guns back. And other people say it a lot more loudly and say that this is a big political stand, that they want to stand on a hill and wave their flag. And it comes down to a couple things. The first one is that they're worried that they're not going to get the value back for what they call their private property. I mean, they've spent tens of thousands of dollars on these firearms. And, at the beginning, in your intro, you were kind of outlining, well, here's sort of the regulations, how much each gun is worth.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, it's not always clear that actually is how much someone paid for their firearm. Again, maybe they bought some special, adjustments or stocked or different materials. But then also some firearms are collector's items. You think like baseball cards, like those can cost thousands of dollars. But some firearms are also in this range as well. So there's concerns that they're not going to get their money's worth back from it. People share that. And then there's also the broad stroke where they say this is a terrible precedent to set about the government just making certain people's property, legal property, illegal and then confiscating it.
And when did you say the deadline was, again, to figure this all out?
That's right. It's October this year. So the amnesty was put in place saying, like, we're going to make these guns illegal, but it's not illegal. Like, we're not going to charge you for having them until we can figure out this buyback program. They promised that 3 years ago. They haven't followed through on actually making that happen yet, and the timeline is coming to a close. So by October, the government needs to either figure it out or they need to extend the amnesty.
Kieran Oudshoorn, fascinating story. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrew.